12 years ago, she handed me a stack of bank documents, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're better at making money. I'm better at handling it. Let's keep things traditional. One income, one manager." And just like that, everything that should have belonged to both of us started slipping through my fingers. Her name is Rachel. She wore sincerity like perfume. Thick, expensive, and just fake enough to make your head spin if you stayed in the room too long. Back then, I thought she was brilliant, confident, the kind of woman who turned chaos into order. She had all these rules about marriage that, in hindsight, were never about stability, they were about control. She said if I trusted her, I wouldn't need access to our finances. That real partnership meant letting one person lead. And I, God help me, wanted so badly to be her idea of a man that I agreed. She started making every decision. Every purchase had her name on it. Every credit card, every account, every insurance policy, hers, not ours, hers. I worked, she handled. That was the rhythm. When I got home, dinner was made, the house was neat, the kids were bathed. From the outside, everything looked clean, polished, too polished. Then things started getting strange. It wasn't sudden. It was like a slow leak in a pipe you don't notice until the floor's warped. Rachel stopped answering my calls during the day. She always had an excuse. The kids were loud. She was running errands. She left her phone on silent. But there were other things, too. Her smile turned mechanical. Our conversations turned transactional. She'd ask about my day the same way someone checks a receipt, just going through the motions. The strange part? She started getting happier, more relaxed, almost glowing, like someone who had a secret and finally learned how to live with it. I didn't accuse her. I didn't snoop. I didn't even let myself admit what I was suspecting. Instead, I started quietly siphoning money out of the cash jobs I picked up on weekends, appliance repair, some freelance wiring jobs, a little under-the-table carpentry. Nothing huge, just enough to tuck away. I hid it in a shoebox at first, then a fireproof lockbox, then a hidden account under my middle name. It became my ritual. Every dollar I saved was like adding a brick to a wall she couldn't see me building. I didn't know what I was preparing for. Not exactly. Just that something in me had gone cold and sharp. A warning bell ringing in a locked room. Then came the phone call. Not from her. From Jake, my younger brother. We'd grown apart over the years. He was the golden kid growing up. The charmer. The smooth talker. The one Rachel never really liked, or so she said. He called me one night out of the blue, voice slurred like he was 2 drinks too deep. "Hey, Mike. You got a minute?" I stepped out onto the porch, closed the door behind me. "What's going on?" Long silence. Then he laughed. Not a real laugh. One of those crooked, guilty sounds people make when they're about to lie or confess. "She said she'd tell you," he said. "I didn't want to be the one. I swear to God, man. I told her it was a mistake. It was stupid." I stood there, staring at the horizon like it would explain what the hell he was talking about. "She who?" I asked, already knowing. "Rachel." He didn't say it. Didn't have to. My heart dropped so fast it left a vacuum in my chest. "She told me you two were practically separated," he said. "She said you were sleeping in separate rooms, that you stopped caring." I didn't know she was lying, man. I didn't know. I hung up. Not because I didn't want to hear more, but because I already had. I didn't punch a wall. I didn't scream. I just went back inside, sat on the couch, and stared at my kids as they finished their homework. They didn't know yet. They had no idea their mother was a stranger wearing their favorite bedtime smile. And I hadn't even gotten to the worst part. That came 3 days later. When I found the photos, I didn't go looking for them. They found me. It was a Thursday. Ordinary, dull. I came home early from work because one of the warehouse forklifts shorted and they sent everyone home while maintenance sorted it out. I didn't call Rachel to let her know I was coming. No reason to. I thought maybe we'd grab dinner out for once. Do something normal. I walked in and the house was quiet. Unusually so. The kind of silence that feels curated. Her laptop was open on the kitchen table. That was rare. Rachel never left it out. She was obsessive about privacy. Passwords on everything, screen locked even when she walked 5 feet away. But there it was, humming quietly, screen still glowing. Curiosity didn't pull me toward it. Something colder did. I didn't even sit down. I just tilted the screen. She'd been sorting through photos. Thumbnails lined up like trophies. She must have been importing them from her phone. Dozens of images in a folder marked June Retouch. And there they were. Not nudes. Nothing scandalous in the traditional sense. But damning? Absolutely. The kind of pictures you don't take with someone who's your brother-in-law. Jake, shirtless, lying back on our couch. Rachel kneeling beside him in my hoodie, her hand on his chest, her lips pressed to his neck. My brother, laughing. Her, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not at me. The timestamps burned into my eyes. 1 week ago. The kids were at my mom's. I was at work. They were here. I copied everything. Every photo. Every message I could find. I didn't touch anything else. I didn't want her to know I'd seen it. Not yet. I needed time. Space to move. Leverage. That night, I told her I was going to visit a buddy out of town for the weekend. Told her I needed to clear my head from work stress. She barely looked up from her wine. Sure, she said. You should get away. I didn't go to my friends. I drove to the other side of the county, met with the real estate agent I'd been quietly working with for the last 8 months. Signed the last of the papers. A small 2-story house. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Bought outright in cash from those 12 years of weekend jobs and secret savings. Every hour I'd spent away from her had bought me freedom. I spent that night sleeping on the floor of my new living room. Alone, but finally not under her roof. No lies hanging above me. Just wood beams and silence. The next morning, I picked up Mason and Emma from school without telling Rachel. It wasn't some dramatic abduction. I signed them out early, took them for lunch, said we were going on a short trip. They didn't question it. They laughed, ate too much, and asked if we were going to Grandma's. I told them no, someplace better. Rachel didn't notice until evening. By then, I'd blocked her on every phone. I didn't want shouting. I didn't want excuses. I wanted the police report she did end up filing. 2 hours after realizing I wasn't coming back. She told the cops I kidnapped the kids. She told them I was mentally unstable, that I'd been acting paranoid for years, and might be dangerous. She cried on the phone to my mother. She demanded my brother explain himself, then doubled back and accused him of seducing her. Her entire reality bent and cracked under pressure, and instead of guilt, she picked the most familiar weapon she had, control. But then the cops saw the evidence. The photos, the account statements, the fact that I had legal custody rights, that I had the house in my name, that she had been siphoning money from our joint account into a private one, and that she was using it to pay for hotel rooms under aliases. She collapsed under her own web of lies. And then the rage came. Not mine. Hers. She showed up at the new house 3 days later. Not with tears. Not with apologies. But with fury so thick it clung to her like perfume. I heard her before I saw her. The tires screeched up the driveway, and a car door slammed with enough force to make the windows tremble. The kids were inside watching cartoons. I stepped out and shut the front door behind me. There she stood, in the middle of my gravel path, arms crossed, chin high, eyes burning. Rachel had this way of looking at you like she was 3 seconds away from snapping a verdict, like a judge who already decided your fate before the trial even started. "This is my family," she hissed, voice low, venomous. "You stole my kids." I stayed silent. I wasn't going to give her fuel. She stepped closer. "You think this little tantrum makes you a father? You're pathetic, Michael. You think buying a house gives you the moral high ground? You lied to me for years." I couldn't help it. I laughed. A short, breathless, shocked kind of laugh. The kind that breaks out when someone says something so twisted it doesn't feel real. "You cheated on me with my brother," I said. "In my house, on my couch, while I was working myself into the ground to keep this family afloat." She didn't flinch. She actually rolled her eyes. "You and I haven't been a couple in years," she snapped. "You were a paycheck, a warm body. I told you 100 times we were done. You just never listened. You never said a damn word," I said, stepping forward now, my voice rising. "You smiled in my face and let me raise those kids while you played house with my own blood. You made me feel like I was crazy when I asked questions. You lied to me, gaslit me." Rachel's face twisted into something inhuman. "You weren't man enough to handle the truth, Michael. You never were. And that was the moment the last piece of denial inside me died. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a broken marriage. This was deliberate, cold. A long game played with my time, my money, my love. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even pretending to be. She was just angry that I beat her at her own game. I have full documentation of everything, I said. The money you took, the messages, the hotel receipts, and the police already dropped your kidnapping claim. You're lucky I'm not pressing charges. That got her. Just a flicker, a brief, involuntary twitch in her jaw. She turned to leave, then stopped and threw one last grenade over her shoulder. You're going to regret this, Michael, she said, her voice quieter now. You think you're the hero? Fine. But heroes don't survive reality for long. Then she got in her car and drove away. I stood there for a long time after she left, heart pounding, the sound of her tires echoing in my bones. Not because I was scared of her, not anymore, but because I realized something far worse. She wasn't done. Rachel was never the type to lose. And now that I'd taken back control, she'd come at me from another angle. I just didn't know what it would be yet. But I knew it was coming. It started with the emails. At first, they came once or twice a day, polite, even friendly in tone. Rachel suddenly wanted to discuss things like adults. She wanted to create a peaceful co-parenting arrangement. She used words like compromise and rebuild and amicable like they weren't completely alien to her. She dropped her usual venom, laced her sentences with concern. She asked if the kids were eating well, if they missed her, if maybe we could have a meeting, just the two of us, no lawyers. But I knew her rhythm by now. This was the calm before a different kind of storm. The mask had shifted again. She wanted something. When I didn't respond, the tone changed. Slowly, then suddenly. Accusations. Thinly veiled threats. She told me she was speaking to a custody lawyer. That my financial secrecy made me look unfit. That she was gathering evidence of emotional manipulation. That I'd alienated the children from their mother. That I was teaching them to hate her. And then, the real kicker, she demanded half of the house. The one she didn't know existed until a week ago. The one paid for with money I earned without her knowledge. Through work she considered beneath our lifestyle. She claimed the funds were marital assets. Despite coming entirely from under-the-table side jobs she mocked me for taking. She didn't care about the house. Not really. She cared about reminding me she could still twist the knife. Then came the kids. It started small. Mason, my oldest, asking if Mommy was okay, if I still loved her. He didn't ask with anger. He asked with confusion, like someone had been rewiring his version of the truth. Rachel had started calling them again, sneakily. She'd wait until they were at school. Message Mason through his class tablet. Send check-in videos that made her look maternal and heartbroken. She told them I was keeping them away, that she missed bedtime stories, that she cried every night because they weren't there. Emma, younger and sharper than she lets on, didn't buy it. She told me, quietly, that Mommy said not to tell you she called. And just like that, I realized Rachel wasn't trying to win custody. She was trying to win them. Emotionally. Psychologically. Rewrite the narrative in their little minds so that one day, when they were old enough, they'd look back and think I broke the family. That I took them away. Couldn't allow that. I recorded everything. Every message. Every unauthorized call. I set up alerts on their devices, installed digital monitoring. Not because I wanted to invade their privacy, but because Rachel had no boundaries. She wasn't trying to reunite a family. She was conducting a slow, psychological campaign of sabotage. She escalated again. Showed up unannounced outside their school. Cried in front of the staff. Said she just wanted a hug. Made a scene so big the principal called me personally. I showed them the court agreement. The no-contact conditions still active pending investigation. She was escorted off school grounds. 2 days later, she posted a full manifesto on Facebook. Accused me of being a controlling narcissist. Said I was isolating her children. She tagged Jake in it, said he was a victim too, that I'd always been jealous of their bond. She used the words emotional abuse like confetti. Crafted an entire fantasy in which she was the misunderstood matriarch of a household ruined by her paranoid, bitter husband. I watched it unfold like theater. Friends unfriended her. Some, surprisingly, stood by her, probably those who'd only ever seen the curated version of Rachel. The one who baked perfect cupcakes and quoted parenting books. Not the one who weaponized affection. But it didn't matter. I had facts. Evidence. My lawyer said her public behavior would tank her credibility in court. What he didn't say, what he didn't need to say, was that I'd crossed a line she never expected. I'd made her visible. She had spent her entire life controlling perception. Now her mask was cracking under daylight. But I wasn't ready for what she did next. Because when Rachel gets cornered, she doesn't back down. She burns the whole room. It came on a Sunday morning, the quiet kind, the kind where kids are still in pajamas and cereal is spilling on the floor and cartoons are too loud. I was sitting at the table with Emma trying to untangle a knot in her doll's hair when I got the text. Not from Rachel. From Jake. I didn't know she filed that. I swear, Mike, she used my name. I didn't sign anything. I stared at it for a full minute before typing back one word. What? He replied with a screenshot. It was a court notice. Filed the day before. A joint petition from Rachel and Jake. Claiming guardianship over my children. My kids. My blood. They were arguing I was mentally unstable. That Rachel and Jake, as a stable unit, should be awarded temporary guardianship until the father undergoes psychiatric evaluation and financial audit. I felt something in my chest go tight and then hollow. Not rage. Not panic. Not even heartbreak. Something new. A kind of clarity that only comes when someone decides to rewrite your life in ink. Jake had been complicit. Whether from guilt or fear or just plain weakness, he'd allowed her to use his name on legal documents. He was now legally attempting to position himself as a better father figure to my kids. I called my lawyer before I even finished reading the full document. He picked up immediately. I think he knew something big was coming. She's trying to bypass custody court, he said. If she can establish emergency guardianship, especially with another adult cosigner, she could force a temporary ruling in her favor. If a judge thinks you're a danger, even for a few weeks, she'll get them, I said flatly. Exactly. The next 48 hours were a blur of affidavits, digital evidence compilations, calls to school staff, messages from my mother, and testimony requests from neighbors who'd seen Rachel's dramatic driveway screaming matches. My lawyer and I built a wall, brick by brick, fast as we could. We moved up the court date. Emergency hearing. Tuesday morning. That Monday night I couldn't sleep. The kids were out cold, curled up in their beds. I walked through the house like it was a museum. Touched the door frames, the photos we'd taken in the first few months after the move. The blanket Emma insisted on draping over the couch even though it was old and pilled. Mason's Lego half-finished fortress on the coffee table. They felt like artifacts of a war I didn't want but was losing anyway. Then my phone rang. No ID. But I answered. It was Rachel. Her voice was calm. Not slurred. Not emotional. Just deliberate. I never wanted to do this, Michael, she said. But you didn't leave me a choice. You embarrassed me. You took my kids. You think you're the only one who can protect them. I am the only one who protected them, I said. From you. From Jake. She sighed. You always needed someone to blame. That's your real sickness. And now it's about to cost you everything. She hung up before I could respond. I didn't call back, because she'd already told me everything I needed to hear. This wasn't about kids, or love, or even revenge. This was about Rachel refusing to live in a version of the world where she didn't win. The courtroom the next day felt colder than I expected. No jury, just a judge with too many cases and too little patience. Rachel and Jake sat beside each other, both dressed in muted tones like they were trying to blend into the wallpaper. She wore sorrow like a badge. He didn't look up once. But when my lawyer laid everything out, the texts, the photos, the school incident, the false police report, Rachel's mask began to crack. And then I spoke. I told the court about 12 years of financial blackouts, of being locked out of my own life. I told them how I watched my kids become bargaining chips. I told them I built a house from sweat and silence, and she tried to poison it before it even had time to stand. Rachel interrupted me 3 times. The judge warned her each time. Then the decision came. Petition denied. No guardianship granted. Custody arrangement reaffirmed. Rachel was issued a warning. One more violation of the current terms, and supervised visitation would be enforced. Jake didn't speak. Not once. Rachel glared at me with the kind of hatred that can't be reasoned with. The kind that says, this isn't over. And she was right, because even after the legal loss, she had one more card left to play. The next phase of Rachel's war wasn't loud. It was slow. It was personal. After the court shut down her guardianship stunt, she stopped trying to wrestle the kids away in public. No more surprise school visits. No more fake legal documents. But instead of retreating, she changed tactics. She went underground. Strategic. Psychological. It started with Mason's backpack. I opened it one evening to find a note. Folded, slipped into a side pocket. No name. Just a few lines, handwritten in Rachel's neat, cursive script. He doesn't tell you the truth, does he? Ask Daddy what he did in Phoenix in 2017. Ask him what he was hiding while you were watching cartoons. He's not the man you think he is. I read it twice. Phoenix? 2017? I hadn't even been to Phoenix in 2017. And I sure as hell wasn't hiding anything. I ran my entire calendar back mentally. Double-checked my old phone backups just to be sure. Nothing. No trips. No lies. She was planting poison. Trying to make them question me, even if the story didn't make sense. The point wasn't to expose anything, it was to confuse them, create cracks in trust. Make me look like the liar, the secret keeper. I confronted Mason gently. Asked if Mommy gave him the note. He shook his head. Looked me right in the eye. No, Daddy. She gave it to my friend Liam and told him to put it in my bag. The next day, Rachel messaged me. Not through text, not through email, but by creating a fake Instagram account and tagging me in a photo. It was her, sitting on my brother Jake's lap. In my old college hoodie, the caption read, "Sometimes you have to lose a liar to find the truth. #family, #rebuilding. The comments were worse. People, probably her circle, talking about how strong she was for escaping me. That she looked so happy with someone who actually loved her. One even asked, "Isn't that her ex-husband's brother?" Bold queen. Bold queen. I didn't respond publicly. I never did. That was her battleground, and I wasn't stepping foot on it. But I made sure the post was archived in the folder I'd been building for months, screenshots, recordings, messages. Everything. My lawyer called it digital artillery. But what got me wasn't the social circus. It was the moment Emma woke me up at 3 a.m. crying because she had a nightmare that I went to jail and never came back. I sat with her for an hour, rocking her, brushing her hair back, promising her I wasn't going anywhere. And through soft hiccups, she whispered, "Mommy said daddies go to jail when they lie." That's when I realized. Rachel wasn't just fighting to destroy my life. She was trying to rewrite our children's entire childhood. So I made a choice. I installed security cameras on the property, front, back, inside every common area. I switched the kids' schools. Not far, just enough to change the pattern. I filed for a motion to restrict unsupervised contact permanently, armed with her new campaign of psychological warfare. And then, I did something I didn't want to do. I met with Jake. Not out of forgiveness. Not out of brotherly hope. But because I needed to know what Rachel had over him. Because this kind of madness only makes sense if there's something bigger underneath. We met at a diner. Neutral ground. He looked like a man living in his own grave. Hollow-eyed. Half-shaven. He didn't order food. "I didn't know she'd take it this far," he said, voice shaking. "She said you were emotionally abusive. That you were hitting the kids. That you were hiding money offshore." I laughed. Couldn't help it. "And you believed her?" "She showed me photos," he whispered, "of bruises. On Mason's back." I froze. "What bruises?" "She said they were from you," he said. "But later, I saw them in a different set of photos. Different context. From when he fell off his bike." He swallowed hard. "She doctored them. That was it. The missing puzzle piece. She was preparing a narrative, one made of false evidence, twisted stories, and planted trauma. And Jake? He was her pawn. Used, discarded, looped back in when needed. And still too weak to walk away. I stood up to leave. He grabbed my wrist. "Mike," he said, eyes wide. "You don't know what she's capable of. You think this is the end." "No," I said. "I think she's just getting started." I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the edge of my bed with the door cracked open, listening to my children breathe in their rooms, trying to anchor myself in the present. Every shadow in the hallway felt longer than it should be. every creak in the floor sharper. My mind wouldn't stop spinning. She forged injuries, fake bruises, edited photos of our son. From a bike fall he had when I was literally right there, helping him clean the scrape with antiseptic. Photos that she saved, twisted, filed away for later like a weapon she hadn't fired yet. This wasn't just malicious. This was planned. Rachel was building a case against me in advance, laying the groundwork to accuse me of abuse if she ever needed a nuclear option. And she almost had Jake believing it. If I hadn't caught the signs when I did, if I hadn't quietly built that archive, that home, that distance, she might have succeeded. I didn't go to work the next morning. I went to war. First, I called the school. Again, I scheduled a formal interview with the counselor, explained what was going on. They agreed to provide written statements regarding the children's emotional state, their testimonies about Rachel's behavior, and how often she'd attempted to reach them despite the custody restrictions. Then I sat with Mason and Emma. No sugarcoating. No softening. I need to ask you some serious questions, I told them. And I want you to answer with the truth, no matter what. Can you do that? They nodded. Mason was nervous. Emma just looked curious. I asked if Rachel had ever told them stories about me, if she'd ever said I hurt anyone, if she ever said I might go to jail. They nodded slowly. Not everything, but bits, phrases, scary ones. She said you lied to the court. Mason admitted, eyes down. She said you tricked people, Emma added. But she also said to not tell you she said that. I thanked them, held their hands, promised them that telling the truth was the bravest thing they'd ever done. Then I took them to my mother's. Not because I didn't trust myself to protect them, but because I didn't trust what Rachel might do next. And I was right. That night I came home to find the locks had been tampered with. Not broken, picked. Nothing was stolen. But someone had been inside. Drawers were open. My files were disturbed. The closet safe, hidden beneath a false panel, was scratched around the edges like someone had been trying to lift it. She was looking for the archive, the hard drive, the USB backups, the photos, the screen recordings, the folder labeled just in case that my lawyer and I built together. But she wouldn't find them, because I had already moved them. 3 copies. One in a bank deposit box. One with my lawyer. One encrypted on a cloud server that she'd never find without a key she didn't know existed. Still, it hit me. Rachel had officially crossed into something darker. Trespassing. Sabotage. She was done playing games in the daylight. So I set the final trap. I called Jake again. One last time. Told him I needed his help. That I needed him to meet with her and ask direct questions. To record it. Covertly. Legally. He was reluctant. Ashamed. But he agreed. And when they met in a public place on his turf, he did exactly what I asked. He asked her why she wanted full custody. Why she planted the note. Why she told the kids I was going to jail. Her answers were perfect. Cold. Clear. Recorded in her own voice. With enough venom to drown her in court. Because I can't stand him thinking he won. Because if I can't have them, I'll make sure they never look at him the same way again. Because he humiliated me, Jake. Because he made me feel small. And he doesn't get to walk away clean. No one humiliates me and walks away clean. It was done. We had her. All of it. The manipulation, the trespassing, the attempted framing, the psychological warfare. In her own voice, laced with cruelty and premeditated spite, I sent the recording to my lawyer that night. He replied within minutes. We're filing for full custody. This ends now. The day we filed for full custody, something in me shifted. Not relief, not triumph, just a strange kind of stillness, like standing in the eye of a hurricane you built brick by brick. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. It was about drawing a line, finally, in cement instead of sand. It was about closing the door on a war I hadn't started, but one I refused to lose. Not for me, but for Mason and Emma. For the people I swore to protect when they were still the size of my forearm, when their whole world fit into my arms and a bedtime story. We submitted the full petition with the new evidence. The audio recording of Rachel's confession, the note she planted in Mason's backpack, the unauthorized visits to school, the tampered lock footage from my security system. It was enough to bury her legally, not just challenge custody, but incite criminal charges if the DA felt bold. The court scheduled a hearing within the week. Emergency status. My lawyer said we had a clean shot at not only securing sole custody but also terminating Rachel's unsupervised visitation permanently, possibly even seeking a restraining order. But Rachel didn't come to court that week. She vanished. Phone disconnected. Jake said he hadn't seen her in days. No one at her apartment answered. Social media went dark. Her car wasn't parked outside her usual coffee spot or her gym. Her online presence, usually so curated and constant, went dead. The silence was louder than any of her screams. And then came the envelope. Hand-delivered by a courier. No return address. No signature. Just my name. Printed on a plain white label. Sealed in a tan folder. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Printed. Typed in her usual serif font. No apology. No explanation. Just this. You win. But just remember, someday, they'll ask why I'm gone. And they'll wonder why you didn't fight harder to keep their mother in their lives. No threat. No love. No regret. It wasn't surrender, it was sabotage from a new angle. Because she knew. She knew the one part of this war I couldn't control was how my kids would remember it. How the version of events they carry into adulthood would be shaped by time, by pain, by the absence of a mother who once laughed at their birthdays and read them stories before she decided her ego came first. And she wanted to stain that memory with doubt. I handed the letter to my lawyer. He scanned it, sighed, and said, "She's done. But don't think for a second she won't try again someday. These types don't fade. They just wait." 2 days later, the court granted me sole legal and physical custody. Supervised visitation rights for Rachel. Suspended indefinitely until she complied with mandatory psychiatric evaluations and a full behavioral review. Jake disappeared too. Moved out of state. Sent a single message a week later. Just the word, sorry. I deleted it. Because sorry doesn't raise your kids. Sorry doesn't erase a decade of betrayal. Sorry is just the sound a coward makes when they run out of lies. But that night, when the house was finally quiet and the paperwork stamped and the war officially over, I found myself standing outside my daughter's room, watching her sleep, thinking of that final line in the letter. And I whispered to the dark, "They will ask, Rachel. But they won't wonder why you're gone. They'll already know." The first week after the court ruling was unlike anything I expected. I thought I'd feel victorious, free, light. Instead, it felt like coming home after a tornado. The roof still standing, but everything inside shifted. Strange. The kids were quiet. Not scared, not sad. Just alert. Like they were waiting to see what version of life would come next. Like they didn't quite believe peace was real. And I didn't blame them. They'd lived too long in a house with walls made of eggshells and silence. With smiles that cracked when no one was looking. With a mother who taught them love was performance, not presence. So I started slow. Mornings became rituals. Real ones. No rushed breakfasts. No barking orders about missing shoes. I made pancakes. Let Emma pick the toppings. Let Mason DJ from his tablet even when it drove me insane. I started asking different questions. Not, "How was school?" but "What made you laugh today?" Or, "What was the weirdest thing you heard all day?" At first, they didn't know how to answer. Then they started to open. A little more each day. We created new traditions. Friday night blanket forts. Sunday backyard picnics. Even if it was just sandwiches on paper plates. We planted a tree out front. Mason named it Armor. Said it was for protection. Emma just wanted to tie a ribbon around it. But even as we built this new life, the ghost of Rachel lingered. She didn't contact the kids. Not once. No letters, no emails, no surprise court filings. It was like she'd slipped off the planet. A part of me wondered if she'd moved out of state, changed her name, started spinning a new story for a new audience. The truth is, I didn't care. But the kids did. Mason especially. One night, about a month later, I found him sitting on the floor of his room, looking through an old photo album. One we hadn't touched in years. There was a picture in there. Rachel holding him at age 2, laughing, eyes bright. Not the monster she'd become. Not the storm. Was she always like this? He asked me, not looking up. I sat down beside him. No, I said quietly. She wasn't. And that was the truth. Rachel hadn't always been cruel. There were days when she'd been tender, generous. Before the lies calcified. Before control became her only love language. But that version of her died a long time ago, and I wasn't going to resurrect it just to soften the blow. Mason nodded, almost as if he knew what I didn't say. Did she love us? He asked. I didn't answer right away, because how do you explain that some people confuse love with ownership? That some people love themselves so loudly they drown out everything else? That Rachel's kind of love was real in her own mind, and that made it dangerous? So I just said, she did, in her way. But sometimes, someone's way hurts too much to keep around. He didn't ask anything else. But I saw the understanding settle into his shoulders. Emma asked different questions, softer ones. She wanted to know if Rachel would come back, if she'd try to take them again, if she'd be angry that Emma called me the good parent. I told her the truth. She might come back someday, I said. But if she does, it won't be like before. I won't let her hurt us again. Emma blinked, then nodded like that was all she needed. Then she whispered, even superheroes have to fight more than once, right? And I smiled for the first time in what felt like years. Right, I said. But this time we're stronger. The house was quiet again. Not the tense silence of fear, not the fragile hush after a fight, but the deep, easy quiet of safety. A stillness earned, not given. It had been 6 months since Rachel vanished from our lives like smoke dispersing after a fire. The court orders held. No contact, no appeals, no last-minute letters begging for forgiveness or twisting the truth one last time. Nothing. And that nothing was louder than any scream she'd ever thrown my way. The kids adjusted. Not all at once. Not cleanly, but steadily. Mason stopped flinching when the doorbell rang. Emma started drawing pictures of our family again. Now just 3 stick figures and a cat she wanted. No shadowy fourth looming in the corner. They were healing. We all were. The funny thing is, healing doesn't look the way people think it does. It doesn't feel cinematic. There's no montage. No triumphant music. It's slow, quiet, mundane. It's realizing you haven't thought about her in 3 days. It's hearing the kids laugh and knowing the sound isn't hiding something. It's coming home and trusting your own door will still be locked. I finally got a chance to look at myself in the mirror without flinching. Not just physically. All of it. The man I was when I met her, eager to please, hungry for approval, blind to red flags because I mistook confidence for character. The husband I became, quiet, worn down, just trying to survive the emotional minefield she built around our home. And now, the father, the protector, the man who finally saw what was happening and chose not to stay in it. That's the part one keeps circling back to. I stayed too long. People don't talk about that part enough. How easy it is to stay when the manipulation is wrapped in charm. How silence becomes a coping mechanism. How survival mode tricks you into thinking peace means walking on eggshells a little softer each day. You tell yourself, it's not that bad. Because the bruises are all under the surface. But emotional fractures cut deeper than any punch. And Rachel? She wasn't broken. She was calculated. She knew how to bend reality until I questioned the shape of my own reflection. She weaponized words. She rewrote memories. And she used the one thing she knew I loved more than anything, our children, as pawns in a game I didn't know we were playing until she tried to take everything. But now I know better. And if someone reading this is sitting in that same kind of silence, let me say this. You don't need a dramatic exit to leave. You don't need proof of bruises to walk away. If you're being controlled, diminished, erased in your own home, that's reason enough. You can leave. You can rebuild. And when you do, the air will feel different. Cleaner. Sharper. You'll breathe and realize this is what it's supposed to feel like. The other night, Emma came into the kitchen holding her stuffed bunny, hair wild, half asleep. "Daddy?" she whispered, tugging my sleeve. "I had a dream we were all flying." "Oh yeah," I said, smiling. She nodded. "You were holding us so we didn't fall." I knelt down, pulled her close. "That's what dads do," I said. And that was it. The war ended not in a courtroom, not in some dramatic last stand, but in a kitchen at night, with the weight of a child's dream in my arms. This was the peace Rachel never understood. You don't win by control. You win by showing up. Every day. Especially after the storm. So here I am. Still standing. Still showing up. And finally free.